The slap echoed through the Montfort ballroom like a crack of thunder, silencing the orchestra and freezing 300 guests mid-conversation. Marin Holloway's cheek burned where Lady Bexley's palm had connected, the shock of it radiating through her skull and down her spine. She stood perfectly still, her hand half raised toward the crystal punch glass she'd been reaching for, her borrowed gray dress suddenly feeling like a shroud. Clumsy, worthless girl. Lady Bexley's voice carried across the stunned silence with deliberate projection. I should never have agreed to bring you. The Holloway name taints everything it touches. Marin's throat closed. She could feel the eyes upon her, hundreds of them, gleaming with that particular hunger society reserved for public humiliations. The whispers had already begun, and were spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Holloway, isn't that the family? The card cheat's daughter. Her father died in disgrace, you know. Shot himself rather than face. I heard she's been working as a companion. Can you imagine? A gentleman's daughter reduced to... Each word landed like a stone. Marin wanted to disappear, to sink through the polished marble floor and never resurface. But she'd learned long ago that wanting changed nothing. Forgive me, Lady Bexley. Her voice came out steady, though it cost her everything. I'll remove myself. See that you do, and don't expect payment for tonight. Your services are no longer required. The crowd parted as Marin walked toward the exit, creating a corridor of silk and judgment. She kept her chin lifted, her gaze fixed on the distant doors, refusing to give them the satisfaction of tears. 3 seasons she'd survived in London's cruel margins, 3 seasons of whispered insults and closed doors, 3 seasons of watching her mother fade and her brother spiral and her own hopes wither like flowers denied sunlight. She would survive this too. Miss Holloway, the voice stopped her 3 steps from freedom, deep, commanding, carrying an authority that made the surrounding whispers falter. Marin turned despite herself. The man approaching her was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in evening clothes so perfectly tailored they could only have come from the finest establishments in London. Dark hair swept back from a face of sharp angles and sharper intelligence. Gray eyes assessed her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She didn't recognize him, but she recognized the quality of him, the unconscious power in his movements, the way the crowd instinctively shifted to create space around him. I don't believe we've been introduced, she said carefully. We haven't. His lips curved slightly, though the expression held no warmth. But my sister has spoken of you often. Delphine will be devastated she missed your arrival. The lie was so smooth, so confidently delivered, that Marin almost believed it herself. She had no idea who this man was. She had certainly never met anyone named Delphine. But the crowd was listening, recalculating, and the man's hand was already at her elbow, steering her away from the exit. I think you've mistaken me for someone else, she whispered urgently. I haven't. His grip tightened fractionally. Play along, Miss Holloway, and unless you'd prefer to return to Lady Bexley's tender mercies. They were moving now, cutting through the ballroom toward a private alcove, where heavy curtains offered some semblance of privacy. Marin's pulse quickened. This was madness. This man was a complete stranger, and she was allowing him to lead her away from the only exit she knew. Who are you? He released her elbow once they were screened from the main crowd, though his eyes remained fixed on her face with that unsettling intensity. Caius Ashford, he said, Duke of Windermere. The title crashed through her like ice water. A duke. She'd just been rescued, if that was even the right word, by a duke. One of the most powerful men in England had witnessed her humiliation and chosen to intervene. Why? Your Grace. She managed a curtsy despite her trembling legs. I appreciate your kindness, but I should clarify that I don't know your sister. I've never met anyone named Delphine. There's been some confusion. There's been no confusion. His expression remained unreadable. I know exactly who you are. Maren Holloway, daughter of the late Edmund Holloway, whose disgrace 5 years ago rendered your family unmarriageable. You've spent the last 3 seasons working as a companion to various society women, each position ending when your employers discovered your background or simply tired of the association. Lady Bexley was your 4th employer this year alone. Each fact landed like a blow. He'd investigated her. This wasn't chance or kindness. This was calculated. What do you want? The question came out harder than she intended. I want you to continue playing the role I've just assigned you. His gaze held hers. My sister's dear friend from the country, a guest at Windmere House for the remainder of the season. Why would I agree to that? Because Lady Bexley just dismissed you without pay. Because your mother's health is failing and your brother's debts are mounting. Because in approximately 4 minutes, half the ton will know that the Duke of Windmere claimed you as a family friend. And if you contradict that claim, you'll look like either a liar or a fool. He paused. And because I'm offering you an opportunity. Maren's mind raced. He was right about all of it. Every humiliating detail. She had nothing waiting for her outside those ballroom doors, except a cold, rented room and a future of diminishing options. What kind of opportunity? The kind that benefits us both. His voice dropped lower. My grandmother expects me to announce an engagement before the season ends. She selected Lady Venetia Harcourt as her preferred candidate. A perfectly suitable match in every way except one. Which is, I don't want to marry her. The words came out flat, final. I don't want to marry anyone my grandmother has chosen. But she won't relent unless she believes I've found an alternative. The implication settled over Maren like a weighted blanket. You want me to pretend to be that alternative. I want you to be convincing enough to buy me time. A few months, the season's end. Then we'll part ways amicably, and you'll be compensated for your trouble. Compensated how? References, connections, like enough money to settle your family's debts and secure your mother proper care. He watched her face as he spoke, cataloging her reactions. Or you can walk out of this ball right now, return to your rented room, and spend the next 3 seasons watching doors close in your face, while Lady Bexley tells everyone who'll listen about the card cheat's daughter, who dared reach for punch in her presence. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Maren knew it. He knew it. The only question was whether she had enough pride left to pretend otherwise. If I agree, she said slowly, I have conditions. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps. Or interest. Name them. Before she could respond, the curtain swept aside. A young woman burst through, dark-haired and bright-eyed, practically vibrating with excitement. Caius, there you are. Everyone's talking about... She stopped short, her gaze landing on Maren. Oh, is this her? The mystery woman you claimed as my friend? A delighted grin spread across her face. This is wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. I'm Delphine, by the way. Your dearest friend from the country, apparently. We have so much catching up to do. Maren stared at the young woman, who had just declared them dearest friends, despite having met approximately 12 seconds ago. Delphine Ashford shared her brother's dark coloring, but where Caius was all sharp edges and controlled intensity, she radiated warmth like a small sun. Delphine, Caius said, his tone carrying a warning. Don't Delphine me in that voice. She waved dismissively at her brother, before grabbing both of Maren's hands. You poor thing. I saw what that dreadful Bexley woman did. The absolute nerve. But don't worry. You're with us now, and nobody touches people we claim. She squeezed Maren's fingers. You will let us claim you, won't you? Please say yes. It'll be such an adventure. I haven't finished outlining the arrangement, Caius said dryly. You were outlining. How perfectly dull. Delphine rolled her eyes. Let me explain properly. Our grandmother is a dragon, a well-meaning dragon, but a dragon nonetheless. She's decided Caius must marry immediately, and she's chosen Lady Venetia Harcourt as the sacrifice. I mean bride. Delphine. Lady Venetia is beautiful and wealthy and boring as unbuttered toast. She laughs at things that aren't funny and agrees with everything grandmother says and looks at Caius like he's a prize horse at auction. Delphine shuddered theatrically. But if Caius is publicly courting someone else, grandmother can't force the match, and at the end of the season, you simply decide you don't suit. Everyone walks away. No harm done. Except to my reputation, Marin said quietly. The words created a small silence. Delphine's bright expression dimmed slightly, and even Caius shifted his weight, something almost like discomfort crossing his features. Your reputation will be protected, he said finally. You'll be presented as my sister's guest, a respectable friend of the family. When we end the association, it will be handled with discretion. No scandal will touch you. And if your grandmother investigates my background, if Lady Venetia decides to dig into who I really am, then they'll find the truth. Delphine's chin lifted defiantly. You're the daughter of a gentleman who was wrongfully accused and driven to his death by society's cruelty. It's tragic, not shameful, and if anyone dares suggest otherwise, they'll answer to me. Marin wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that someone could see her father's story as tragedy rather than disgrace. But 5 years of closed doors and cutting whispers had taught her otherwise. I need to think, she said. Of course. Caius reached into his coat and withdrew a card. My carriage will wait outside for 1 hour. If you decide to accept, join us. If not, he paused. I wish you well. Miss Holloway. He offered his arm to Delphine, who cast one last encouraging look over her shoulder before they disappeared through the curtains. Marin stood alone in the alcove, holding the Duke's card like it might explode in her hands. She should refuse. Every rational instinct screamed that this was dangerous, improper, destined to end in disaster. She was a disgraced merchant's daughter, with nothing to offer and everything to lose. Dukes didn't rescue women like her. They certainly didn't invite them to live in their homes and pretend to court them. But what waited for her outside this ballroom? A cold room, an uncertain future. Her mother's cough growing worse each day while the doctor's bills mounted. Callum's gambling debts attracting increasingly dangerous creditors. Marin thought of her father, the way his hands had shaken when he'd come home that final night, the way he'd kissed her forehead and told her to be brave, the gunshot that had echoed through their small house 3 hours later. He'd given up. She wouldn't. The Ashford carriage was easy to identify outside, gleaming black with a gold crest on the door. A footman helped Marin inside, where Delphine immediately pulled her onto the seat beside her with a squeal of delight. I knew you'd come. I told Caius you would. Didn't I tell you, Caius? You did. He sat across from them, his expression unreadable in the carriage's dim interior. Miss Holloway, before we proceed, you mentioned conditions. Right. Her conditions. Marin straightened her spine. 3 of them. First, my mother must be informed properly. A letter explaining that I've accepted a position as Lady Delphine's companion. Nothing about schemes or courtships, just a respectable reason for my absence. Done. Second, when this ends, I want references and introductions that will help me secure a genuine position. Governess, companion, whatever I can obtain, honestly. I won't return to where I was before. Delphine nodded eagerly. I'll introduce you to everyone. By the end of the season, you'll have your pick of offers. And third, Marin met Caius's eyes directly. The moment you actually decide to marry someone, whether it's Lady Venetia or anyone else, this ends immediately. I won't be used as a shield while you conduct a real courtship. I've been humiliated enough for 1 lifetime. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. Or, you have my word, he said. All three conditions. The carriage rumbled through London's darkened streets, carrying Maren toward a life she couldn't have imagined that morning. Delphine chattered enthusiastically about ball gowns and social calendars, but Maren barely heard her. She was watching Caius, trying to understand the man who had just altered the course of her existence. He stared out the window, his profile sharp against the passing streetlights. There was something heavy in his silence, something that had nothing to do with schemes or grandmothers or unwanted matches. How did he die? She asked suddenly. Caius turned. I beg your pardon? Your father. Delphine mentioned your grandmother's expectations increased recently. That usually means a death in the family. Delphine's brightness dimmed. Caius's jaw tightened. Oh, 8 months ago, he said finally. A riding accident. His horse spooked during a storm. I'm sorry. Are you? I know what it is to lose a father. Maren held his gaze. I know what it does to a family. How it reshapes everything you thought you understood about the world. The silence between them felt different now, less confrontational, more like two people recognizing a shared wound. Yes, Caius said quietly. I suppose you do. Windmere House rose before them like a palace from a fairy tale. Cream stone, towering columns, windows blazing with candlelight. Maren's breath caught as the carriage rolled through iron gates and up a curved drive. Welcome home, Delphine whispered, squeezing her hand. Well, welcome to your home for now. I promise you'll love it. Maren wasn't sure love was possible, but as she stepped from the carriage onto the gravel drive, she allowed herself something she hadn't felt in 5 years. Hope. Morning arrived wrapped in silk and the scent of fresh flowers. Maren woke slowly, disoriented by the softness beneath her, the light streaming through windows that shouldn't exist in her cramped, rented room. Then memory crashed back. The ball. Lady Bexley's slap. The Duke's proposition. This enormous bedroom with its rose-colored walls and 4-poster bed and writing desk, positioned perfectly to catch the morning light. She wasn't dreaming. She was actually here. A soft knock preceded the entrance of a young maid with auburn hair tucked under a crisp white cap. Good morning, miss. I'm Wren. I've been assigned as your lady's maid. She carried a tray with tea and toast, and what looked like fresh strawberries. Lady Delphine thought you might want breakfast in your room before meeting the Dowager. The Dowager. Maren's stomach clenched. When? She takes callers at 11, miss. That gives you 2 hours to prepare. Wren set down the tray with practiced efficiency. Lady Delphine also had some dresses sent up. She said you're nearly the same size, and you'll need something suitable while we wait for the modiste. Maren looked toward the wardrobe, which stood open to reveal a rainbow of silks and muslins she couldn't have afforded in 3 lifetimes of work. This is too much, she whispered. Lady Delphine said you'd say that. Wren smiled. She also said to tell you that friends share everything, and you're her dearest friend from the country, so you'd better start acting like it. Despite her nerves, Maren felt her lips curve. Delphine's enthusiasm was impossible to resist, even secondhand. She bathed and dressed in a morning gown of pale blue that fit surprisingly well, allowing Wren to arrange her dark hair in a simple but elegant style. The mirror reflected a stranger, someone who looked like she belonged in this house, in this life. The illusion would shatter the moment she opened her mouth, but for now, she allowed herself to believe it. Delphine collected her at 11:15, practically bouncing with nervous energy. You look perfect. Grandmother will hate it. That's not reassuring. No, it is. She expected some fortune-hunting nobody with bad posture and desperate eyes. Instead, she's getting someone who looks like she belongs here. Delphine linked their arms. Remember, you're my friend. We met at a lending library in Whitmore during my visit to our cousins last autumn. You impressed me with your knowledge of poetry, and we've been corresponding ever since. What if she asks about these cousins? She won't. She hasn't spoken to that branch of the family in 20 years. Delphine paused outside a heavy oak door. Just be yourself, honest, direct. She respects spine. And if my spine isn't enough, then we improvise. Delphine squeezed her hand. Ready? No. But Marin nodded anyway. The Dowager Duchess of Windermere sat in a high-backed chair by the window, positioned to catch both the morning light and anyone who entered her sitting room. She was smaller than Marin expected, silver-haired and sharp-featured, dressed in severe black that somehow managed to look regal rather than mournful. Her eyes, not the same shade as her grandson's, assessed Marin with the focused attention of a hawk examining prey. So, her voice was cool and crisp. This is the young woman who appeared from nowhere to claim my grandson's attention. Marin curtsied deeply. Your Grace. Sit. The Dowager gestured to a chair positioned directly across from her, arranged for maximum scrutiny. Delphine, leave us. Grandmother. Now. Delphine shot Marin an apologetic look and retreated. The door clicked shut, leaving them alone. Tea? The Dowager didn't wait for an answer, simply poured from a silver service, with hands that remained perfectly steady despite her age. Milk? Sugar? Neither, Your Grace. Thank you. A woman of simple tastes. How refreshing. The words held no warmth. Tell me, Miss Holloway, for how much did my grandson offer to pay you? The directness shouldn't have surprised her, but it did. Marin accepted the teacup, using the moment to compose herself. He offered to settle my family's debts and provide references for future employment. So he's buying you. He's compensating me for my time and the risk to my reputation. There's a difference. The Dowager's eyebrow rose fractionally. Is there? You're a disgraced family's daughter, agreeing to play act as a duke's romantic interest. What would you call it? A business arrangement that benefits both parties. Silence stretched between them. The Dowager sipped her tea, her gaze never leaving Marin's face. You know why they called your father a cheat, she said finally. You know the story. Marin's hand tightened on her cup. I know what they accused him of. Accused? Oh, interesting word choice. The Dowager set down her tea. I was at that card party, you know. The night Lord Ashworth claimed your father had marked the deck. Marin's breath caught. You were there? I was, and I saw your father's face when the accusation was made. I saw his shock, his confusion. The Dowager paused. I also saw Lord Ashworth's expression, the triumph he couldn't quite hide. Are you saying... Marin couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying your father was almost certainly innocent. Lord Ashworth owed him money he couldn't repay. A manufactured scandal was easier than settling his debts. The Dowager's voice remained flat, emotionless. I said nothing at the time because it wasn't my business, and your father wasn't important enough to warrant my involvement. He was a nobody. His destruction was convenient for people I didn't wish to antagonize. The words hit Marin like physical blows. Her father's innocence, society's indifference, this woman's casual admission of complicity. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something, Miss Holloway. The Dowager leaned forward. I am not a kind woman. I am not sentimental. I do not care about your feelings or your family's tragedy. What I care about is my grandson. Then why allow this arrangement? Because Caius has been a ghost since his father died. He performs his duties. He attends Parliament. He manages the estates. But he isn't living. He's simply existing. The Dowager's eyes hardened. Lady Venetia would bore him into an early grave. At least you might prove interesting enough to wake him up. Marin absorbed this, trying to reconcile the woman's cruelty with her apparent concern for Caius. And if I hurt him, then I will destroy you, not quickly, not obviously, but thoroughly. I will ensure that every door in England closes in your face. I will make your father's disgrace look like a gentle rebuke by comparison." The Dowager smiled thinly. "Do we understand each other?" "Perfectly, Your Grace." "Good." The Dowager stood, signaling the interview's end. "One more thing. My grandson believes his father's death was an accident. A spooked horse in a storm. He needs to believe that." Something cold slithered down Marin's spine. "And was it? An accident?" The Dowager moved toward the door without answering. Her hand paused on the handle. "Some questions, Miss Holloway, are better left unasked. Welcome to Windmere House. Try not to make me regret allowing you to stay." She swept from the room, leaving Marin alone with her cooling tea and a new, terrible weight. The old Duke's death might not have been an accident. The Dowager knew something, and Marin had just agreed to spend the season living under the same roof as whatever secrets this family was hiding. She was still sitting there, hands trembling slightly, when Delphine burst back through the door. "Well? What did she say?" "You're still alive, so that's promising." "She threatened to destroy me if I hurt your brother." Standard grandmother behavior. Delphine waved dismissively. "She threatens everyone. She threatened Caius's valet last week for pressing his cravats improperly. What else?" Marin considered telling her about the revelations regarding her father, and about the unsettling implication regarding the old Duke's death. But Delphine's face was so open, so hopeful, and Marin wasn't sure yet what any of it meant. "She told me to try not to make her regret this." "Then we're off to a wonderful start." Delphine grabbed her hand. "Come on. Madame Fournier is arriving in an hour for your fitting, and we have so much to plan. The Radcliffe Ball is in 4 days, and everyone will be watching to see if Caius actually presents you properly. 4 days. 4 days until she faced society again, this time on a Duke's arm instead of cowering behind Lady Bexley's skirts. 4 days to learn how to be someone she'd never been allowed to be. 4 days until everything changed. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of silk, strategy, and stolen glances. Madame Fournier descended upon Windmere House with an army of assistants, fabric samples, and opinions delivered in rapid French that Marin only half understood. She was measured, pinned, draped, and assessed from every angle, while Delphine provided enthusiastic commentary. The burgundy brings out the warmth in her complexion, and the ivory with silver threading for the Radcliffe Ball, don't you think? She needs to look striking, but not desperate. "She is standing right here," Marin muttered, wincing as a pin grazed her hip. "Hush, you're a canvas. Canvases don't speak." By the second afternoon, Marin had been fitted for more dresses than she'd owned in her entire life combined. Morning gowns, afternoon dresses, evening wear, ball gowns. In colors she'd only seen in paintings. Each one cost more than her family's annual rent. "It's like this is excessive," she told Delphine during a brief respite between fittings. "This is necessary. Society judges women by their appearance first, their connections second, and their character a distant third." Delphine handed her a cup of tea. "We're giving you armor, Marin. The prettiest armor money can buy." She wasn't wrong. But the weight of it all, the debt she was accumulating to people she barely knew, sat heavy in Marin's chest. Caius remained largely absent during these preparations. She caught glimpses of him at meals, where he was polite but distant, his attention seemingly consumed by estate correspondence and parliamentary business. The easy connection they'd shared in the carriage felt like something she'd imagined. On the third evening, unable to sleep, Marin wandered the darkened hallways until she found the library. It was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves crammed with volumes old and new, a fire crackling low in the hearth, deep leather chairs positioned for comfortable reading, the smell of paper and leather, and something familiar that reminded her of her father's study before everything fell apart. She was running her fingers along the spines, searching for something to quiet her racing mind, when a voice emerged from the shadows. "You're awake late," Marin spun. Caius sat in one of the chairs by the fire, so still she hadn't noticed him. A book lay open in his lap, though his attention was fixed on her. I couldn't sleep. She clutched the fabric of her borrowed dressing gown. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding. This room is meant to be used." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit, if you'd like." She hesitated, acutely aware of how improper this was. Alone with a man. At night. In their nightclothes, essentially. If anyone saw them. But the fire was comforting, and she was tired of being alone with her thoughts. And something about the quietness of him made her feel safe in a way she couldn't explain. She sat. "What are you reading?" He turned the book so she could see the cover. "Seneca, my father's favorite. You miss him?" It wasn't a question. Caius's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Every day. He paused, searching for words. He was the only person who ever saw me as something other than the heir, the title, the responsibility. He saw Caius. Just Caius. What was he like? Kind, patient, terrible at cards but insisted on playing anyway. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He laughed easily. Loved poetry. Used to read to my mother every evening until she died. Then he read to us instead. Delphine and me. "How old were you when your mother passed?" 12. Delphine was 7. His fingers traced the book's spine. She barely remembers her now. Just fragments. The sound of her laugh. The smell of her perfume. I try to fill in the gaps, but I'm not sure I'm doing it right. Marin's chest ached for him. For the boy who'd lost his mother and become responsible for his sister's memories. For the man who'd lost his father and inherited a world of expectations he'd never asked for. "My father used to read to me too," she said quietly. "History, mostly. He believed that understanding the past was the key to navigating the present." She paused. "After he died, I couldn't look at a history book for 2 years. It hurt too much. And now? Now I read them to remember him, to hear his voice in my head, explaining things, making connections I never would have seen on my own." She met his gaze. "The pain doesn't disappear, but it changes, becomes something you carry instead of something that carries you." Caius studied her for a long moment. The firelight painted shadows across his face, softening his sharp features. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" "Someone desperate. Someone who would grasp at this opportunity without question and perform whatever role I required." His lips curved slightly. "Instead, I got someone who negotiates conditions and challenges my grandmother and wanders my library at midnight, quoting wisdom about grief. I'm sorry to disappoint." "You haven't disappointed me." His voice dropped lower. "That's rather the problem." The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them acknowledged. Something fluttered in Marin's stomach. "The ball is tomorrow," she said, steering toward safer ground. "It is." He closed the book, setting it aside. "Are you ready?" "Delphine seems to think I am." "And what do you think?" "I think I'm terrified." The honesty escaped before she could stop it. "I think tomorrow I'll walk into a room full of people who've already decided I'm worthless, and I'll have to convince them otherwise without revealing that I'm equally convinced they're right." Caius stood abruptly. For a moment, she thought he was leaving, dismissing her vulnerability as inconvenient. Instead, he crossed to one of the shelves, running his fingers along the spines until he found what he was looking for. "Here." He handed her a slim volume bound in deep green leather. "My mother's." She used to say that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision that something else mattered more. Maren took the book carefully, a collection of poems by someone she didn't recognize, the pages worn soft from repeated reading. I can't accept this. It's too precious. Which is exactly why I want you to have it. He held her gaze intently. Take it. Read it. Remember that fear is human, but so is choosing to be brave anyway. Her throat tightened. This man, this guarded, controlled, emotionally distant man, who had just handed her a piece of his dead mother. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded once, then stepped back, the distance between them suddenly feeling like miles. Get some sleep, Miss Holloway. Tomorrow, we perform. He left her alone with the fire and the book, and the unsettling realization that this arrangement was becoming something far more dangerous than either of them had planned. The Radcliffe Ball blazed like a fallen star, windows glowing against the night sky, carriages queuing along the curved drive. Maren pressed her hands against the ivory silk of her gown, trying to calm the trembling that had started the moment they'd left Windermere House. Breathe, Delphine whispered beside her. You look stunning. They'll adore you. They'll eviscerate me. Same thing in society. At least you'll be memorable. Caius sat across from them, immaculate in evening black, his expression giving nothing away. He'd barely spoken since they'd entered the carriage, but his eyes had swept over her once when she'd descended the stairs, lingering just long enough to make her cheeks flush. The dowager occupied the remaining seat, draped in black velvet and diamonds, looking thoroughly unimpressed with everything. Remember, she said as the carriage slowed. You are Delphine's friend, a respectable gentleman's daughter, who has fallen on difficult times through no fault of her own. If anyone asks about your father, you look sad and change the subject. If anyone mentions Lady Bexley, you have no idea what they're referring to. And if someone asks about my relationship with your grandson, you say it's far too early to speak of such things and blush prettily. The dowager's eyes sharpened. Can you blush on command? I suspect the genuine terror will handle that. Something that might have been approval flickered across the dowager's face. Good. Terror reads as modesty. Use it. The carriage door opened. Footmen in powdered wigs helped them descend. Maren took Caius's offered arm, hyper-aware of the strength of him through his sleeve, the steadiness of his presence beside her. Ready? He murmured. No. Perfect. Neither am I. They entered the ballroom together, and the whispers began immediately. Is that the Holloway girl? The one Lady Bexley? With Windermere? Surely not. I heard she's staying at his house, as a guest supposedly, but Maren kept her chin lifted, her smile fixed, and her fingers light on Caius's arm. She felt like a deer surrounded by wolves, but she'd be damned if she'd let them see her flinch. Lady Venetia Harcourt appeared within minutes, materializing from the crowd like a beautiful blonde specter. Her gown was rose silk, her jewels were flawless, and her smile could have cut glass. Your Grace, she curtsied to Caius with practiced perfection. How wonderful to see you, and Miss... She let the pause stretch insultingly long. Holloway, wasn't it? I don't believe we've been properly introduced. We haven't, Maren agreed pleasantly. Lady Delphine speaks of you often. Venetia's smile tightened. Does she? How sweet. I wasn't aware Delphine had such eclectic taste in companions. My sister's taste is excellent, Caius said mildly, as is her judgment of character. The implication landed like a slap. Venetia's cheeks flushed. Of course. I merely meant that Miss Holloway is rather unexpected, given her circumstances. My circumstances have given me perspective, Maren said, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. I've learned to appreciate genuine kindness rather than polished performances. It's quite refreshing, actually. Fewer masks to navigate. Venetia's eyes narrowed. Around them, fans fluttered as listeners absorbed every word. How philosophical. I'm sure your father would be proud. The mention of her father was deliberate, calculated to wound. Maren felt the blade slide between her ribs, but refused to let it show. He would be, she said quietly. He always valued truth over pretense. Before Venetia could respond, the orchestra began a new piece. Caius turned to Maren, his hand extended. I believe this is our dance, Miss Holloway. Your Grace, I thought perhaps you might... Venetia began. Another time, Lady Venetia. His dismissal was polite but final. Miss Holloway, shall we? Maren placed her hand in his and let him lead her toward the dance floor. Behind them, she could feel Venetia's glare like physical pressure. You handled that well, Caius murmured as they took their positions. I wanted to slap her. So did I. His lips quirked. But this will hurt her more, being overlooked while I dance with you. The music swelled. They began to move. Maren had practiced for 3 days with a stern French instructor who'd criticized everything from her posture to her breathing. But this was different. This was real. Caius's hand at her waist, his palm pressed to hers, his intense gaze fixed on her face as they turned across the polished floor. Everyone's watching, she whispered. Let them. They're deciding whether I'm a fortune hunter or a fool. They're deciding whether they can destroy you. His grip tightened slightly. They can't. Not while you're with me. The possessiveness in his voice shouldn't have affected her. This was an arrangement, a performance, nothing real. But the way he looked at her didn't feel like performance. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really, you could have found a dozen women willing to play this role. Women with better connections. Fewer scandals. I didn't want someone with better connections. Then what did you want? The music crescendoed. He spun her, so pulling her closer than strictly proper when they reunited. Someone real, he said quietly. Someone who wouldn't pretend. Someone who'd look me in the eye and tell me I was being a coward instead of agreeing with everything I said. I've never called you a coward. Not yet. But you would if I earned it. Something softened in his expression. That's rarer than you know. The dance ended. They stood at the center of the ballroom, slightly breathless, hands still clasped. Around them, applause scattered through the crowd, uncertain and assessing. You're supposed to release me, Maren murmured. I know. But he didn't move. People are staring. People have been staring since we arrived. Caius, dance with me again. The request was quiet, urgent. The supper dance. Say yes. She should say no. They were already creating too much speculation. 1 waltz was courtship. 2 was declaration. Yes, she heard herself say. His smile, rare and genuine, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. Meet me in the gallery before supper. There's something I want to show you. What? But he was already stepping back, releasing her hand, bowing with formal precision. Until then, Miss Holloway. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving Maren surrounded by curious eyes and the unsettling realization that she'd just agreed to something far more significant than a dance. The hours between the first waltz and supper stretched endlessly, each minute weighted with anticipation and dread. Maren navigated the ballroom with Delphine's guidance, introduced to lords and ladies whose names blurred together. I'm fielding questions about Whitmore and poetry, and how exactly she'd become such close friends with Lady Delphine when no one seemed to remember meeting her before. You're doing wonderfully, Delphine whispered, during a brief respite near the refreshment table. 3 countesses have already asked me for your background, and I've spun such romantic tales about our friendship that I've nearly convinced myself they're true. And Lady Venetia, seething in the corner with her mother, they've been whispering for the past hour. Delphine's eyes sparkled. I've never seen her so rattled. You've done in one evening what a dozen debutantes couldn't manage in 3 seasons. But Maren couldn't share her friend's triumph. The whispers she caught weren't admiring. They were calculating, assessing her weaknesses, to searching for the angle that would bring her down. The Holloway scandal was only 5 years ago. Surely Windmere can't be serious. The Dowager must be livid. After all her work with Venetia, perhaps he's simply amusing himself. Men do, with unsuitable women. Each comment burrowed under her skin. They weren't wrong. She was unsuitable. She was a scandal waiting to happen. And when Caius tired of his rebellion against his grandmother, she'd be discarded like yesterday's flowers. As the supper hour approached, Maren slipped away from Delphine and found her way to the gallery Caius had mentioned. It was a long corridor, lined with portraits, dimly lit by scattered candles, quiet compared to the ballroom's chaos. Caius was already there, standing before a painting of a woman in a blue gown. His expression, unguarded in the shadows, held a sadness that made Maren's chest clench. "Your mother?" she asked softly, approaching. He startled slightly, then nodded. Lady Radcliffe was her closest friend. This portrait was painted 3 years before she died. Maren studied the painting. The woman had Delphine's warmth and her son's strong features, her smile gentle but knowing. She was beautiful. She was kind. That mattered more. Caius turned to face her. "I wanted you to see her, before we return to the performance, before we become characters in society's drama again." "Why?" "Because this is real." He gestured between them. "Whatever else happens tonight, whatever roles we play, I wanted one moment that wasn't about arrangement or strategy, one moment that was just honest." Her pulse quickened. "Son Caius, I know this started as a transaction, a way to buy time, but somewhere between that ballroom and now," he stepped closer, "somewhere it changed. We've known each other less than a week. I know. This is madness. I know that too." His hand rose, hesitating before brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Tell me I'm imagining it. Tell me this is one-sided, and I'll never mention it again. We'll continue our arrangement, and part as planned, and I'll—" "You're not imagining it." The words escaped before she could stop them. Truth, dangerous and undeniable. Caius's breath caught. His hand cupped her face, gentle despite its size. "Maren, this is a terrible idea. Your grandmother will destroy me. Society already thinks I'm a fortune hunter. If this becomes real, I don't care what they think. You should. You're a duke. Your reputation. My reputation means nothing if I spend my life performing for people I don't respect." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "My entire adult life, I've done everything expected of me. Managed the estates, attended parliament, smiled at appropriate matches and danced appropriate dances. And I felt nothing. Nothing but duty and exhaustion, and the occasional urge to burn everything down." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "Then you appeared, defiant and terrified, and refusing to pretend. And suddenly, I remembered what it felt like to want something for myself. What do you want?" "You." The word was barely a whisper. "I want you." His lips brushed hers, feather-light, a question rather than a claim. Maren answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was nothing like she'd imagined. Better. Worse. Devastating in its gentleness. His hands cradled her face like she was precious. Her fingers gripped his lapels like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Everything beyond this moment dissolved into irrelevance. This was real. This was terrifying. This was, well. They broke apart instantly. Lady Venetia stood at the gallery's entrance, her expression triumphant. The card cheat's daughter, alone with the Duke in a darkened gallery. How deliciously scandalous. Venetia. Caius's voice could have frozen fire. This is none of your concern." "I disagree. The Dowager will be very interested to learn how her grandson's guest behaves when she thinks no one is watching." Venetia's smile sharpened. "Unless, well, of course, we can come to some arrangement." "What do you want?" Marin asked, her voice steadier than she felt. "Want? I want what I've been promised for 3 years. Windmere's hand, his title, his fortune." Venetia moved closer, her silk skirts rustling like snakes through grass. "I've cultivated the Dowager's favor. I've played the perfect candidate. I've waited while Caius grieved his father and dodged his responsibilities. I will not be displaced by some desperate nobody with a pretty face and no prospects." "You don't own me," Caius said coldly. "You never did." "Perhaps not. But I can destroy her." Venetia's eyes fixed on Marin. One word in the right ears. One well-placed rumor. By tomorrow morning, every door in London will close in your face. Your mother will be evicted from her home. Your brother's creditors will descend. So and you. She smiled. "You'll be lucky to find work as a scullery maid." The threat hung in the air, poisonous and precise. "Leave," Caius said. "Now, before I forget that we're in polite company. Think carefully, Your Grace. Is she worth the scandal? Is she worth your grandmother's fury, society's condemnation, and the whispers that will follow you for years?" Marin wanted to disappear, wanted to run, wanted to never have agreed to this arrangement that had become so much more complicated than either of them planned. But Caius's hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers laced through hers, steady and sure. "Yes," he said simply. "She is." Venetia's smile faltered for the first time. "You'll regret this. Possibly. But I'll regret losing her more." He led Marin past Venetia without another word, back toward the ballroom. Why, back toward the supper dance that would tell all of society exactly where he stood. Behind them, Marin heard Venetia's sharp intake of breath, the rustle of skirts as she hurried away, presumably to rally her forces. The war had just begun, and Marin wasn't sure either of them would survive it. The supper dance was a declaration of war. Every eye in the ballroom tracked them as Caius led Marin onto the floor for the second time that evening. The whispers had evolved from speculation to scandal, fueled no doubt by whatever Venetia had already begun spreading. But Caius's hand was steady at her waist, his gaze fixed on her face, as if she were the only person in the room. "They're going to talk," Marin murmured as the music began. "They were always going to talk. At least now they have something interesting to discuss. Your grandmother is watching. My grandmother is always watching. It's her primary form of entertainment." Despite everything, Marin felt her lips twitch. "You're remarkably calm for a man who just declared himself in front of his rival." "I'm not calm. I'm terrified." His fingers tightened on hers. "But I've spent 8 months being calm, being appropriate, being exactly what everyone expected, and it nearly destroyed me. Caius, my father told me something once." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her. He said that the greatest regret of his life was waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the proper approval. He said that by the time everything aligned, half his life had passed, and he'd missed 1,000 opportunities to be happy. They turned, silk rustling, candlelight flickering across their faces. "I don't want to wait, Marin. I don't want to be appropriate. I want to choose something for myself, consequences be damned." "And what are you choosing?" "You." His eyes burned into hers. "If you'll have me. Not as an arrangement. Not as a performance. As something real." The music swelled around them, but Marin barely heard it. Her breath came faster, her thoughts scattered. "This is impossible," she whispered. "I'm nobody. A scandal. Your grandmother will never accept." "My grandmother accepted my mother, eventually. A merchant's daughter, with no title and no fortune. She fought it for years, and then she loved her like her own blood." His thumb traced circles on her palm. She'll come around. And if she doesn't, then she doesn't. I'm done living my life for other people's approval. You make it sound simple. It isn't. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. He pulled her slightly closer. Propriety be damned. But you're worth it. This is worth it. The dance ended. They stood at the center of the floor, hands still clasped, breathing harder than the exertion warranted. Around them, the ballroom buzzed like a disturbed hive. Fans fluttered, heads bent together. The dowager's expression could have curdled milk. "Come with me," Caius said. "Away from here, away from all of them." "Where?" "Anywhere. The garden, the terrace, somewhere we can breathe." She should refuse, should return to Delphine's side and pretend this was still an arrangement, still controllable, still safe. Instead, she said, "Oh, yes." They slipped through the French doors onto a moonlit terrace. The night air was cool against Marin's flushed skin, the distant music muffled by stone walls and climbing roses. "Better?" Caius asked. "Better." She moved to the balustrade, looking out over the shadowed gardens. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out what we want this to be." He joined her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I know what I want, but this has to be your choice, too." "What if I choose wrong? What if this ruins both of us?" "Then we'll be ruined together." His hand covered hers on the stone railing. "I'd rather fail spectacularly with you than succeed miserably with someone like Venetia." Marin laughed despite herself. "That's possibly the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. I'm not known for my poetry." "No, well, you're known for your scowling and your silence and your impenetrable reserve. And yet you kissed me anyway. Technically, you kissed me. You kissed back." She turned to face him, something too large to name swelling in her chest. "I did. I'm still not sure it was wise. Wisdom is overrated." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle. "Say you'll stay. Say you'll give this a chance. Not as my arrangement. As my... Your what? Whatever you want to be. Partner, companion, friend. More, eventually, if you'll allow it." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight. I'm asking you to let me earn that right." Marin closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. A duke, asking permission to court her properly, asking her to let him prove himself worthy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." "I'll stay." His kiss this time was different, deeper, a promise instead of a question. When they finally parted, both breathless, Marin felt like she'd stepped off a cliff and discovered she could fly. Then she saw the figure standing in the doorway, the dowager, watching them with an expression that promised storms to come. The carriage ride back to Windmere House was silent as a tomb. Delphine sat beside Marin, gripping her hand with white-knuckled intensity. Caius sat across from them, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the window. The dowager occupied her usual seat, like a queen on a throne of judgment. No one spoke until they were inside the house, away from servants' ears. "My study," the dowager said. "Both of you. Now." It wasn't a request. The study was smaller than Marin expected, lined with books and papers, dominated by a massive desk that had probably witnessed generations of difficult conversations. The dowager settled into the chair behind it, gesturing for Caius and Marin to stand before her like defendants awaiting sentencing. "1 week," she said finally. "You've been in this house barely 1 week, Miss Holloway, and you've already managed to destroy my grandson's prospects, alienate the most suitable match in London, and create a scandal that will be the talk of the season." "Grandmother," Caius began. "Quiet. I'm not finished." Her steely gaze, so like her grandson's, fixed on Marin with laser intensity. "I gave you one instruction. Don't hurt him. And what did you do?" "I fell in love with him." The words escaped before Marin could stop them. Raw, honest, terrifying. The Dowager's expression flickered. The surprise, perhaps. Or something softer. Love, she repeated. You've known him 1 week, and you claim to love him. I claim nothing. I simply told you the truth. Marin lifted her chin. I didn't plan this. I didn't scheme or manipulate or try to trap him. I came here expecting to play a role and leave with references. Instead, I found someone who sees me. Not my scandal, not my poverty. Me. Pretty words. But words don't pay bills or silence gossips or repair the damage done tonight. Then tell me what will. Marin's voice cracked. Tell me what I can do to prove that this is real. That I'm not using him. That I would rather be poor and honest than wealthy and false. The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then she turned to Caius. And you? What do you have to say for yourself? I love her. His voice was steady, certain. So I know you don't approve. I know this complicates everything you've planned. But I am done pretending that duty is enough. I am done performing happiness while feeling nothing. Your father said similar things when he chose your mother. And was he wrong? The question hung in the air. The Dowager's expression shifted, something ancient and painful moving behind her eyes. No, she said quietly. He wasn't wrong. He was happy. Truly happy. Which is more than most people achieve in a lifetime. Then why are you fighting this? Because I don't want to see you hurt. The admission seemed to cost her. Your father loved your mother beyond reason, and when she died, it broke something in him. He functioned. He raised you and Delphine. He managed the estates. But he was never whole again. I know. Do you? No, do you understand what it means to love someone so completely that losing them destroys you? I'm beginning to. The Dowager turned back to Marin. And you, girl, are you prepared for that weight? The scrutiny? The expectations? Being a duchess isn't romantic. It's political. Exhausting. Relentless. I'm not asking to be a duchess, Marin said carefully. I'm asking for a chance to love your grandson without being punished for it. Silence fell. The clock on the mantel ticked. Somewhere distant, a door closed. Lady Venetia came to me tonight, the Dowager said finally. Before we left, she made certain allegations. Marin's stomach dropped. What allegations? That you were seen in a compromising position. That you're a fortune hunter who seduced her way into my grandson's affections. That your father's scandal was just the beginning of your family's moral bankruptcy. None of that is true. I know. The Dowager's voice was tired. I know because I've watched you this past week. I know because you've never once asked for money or jewels or promises. I know because you look at Caius the same way his mother looked at his father. Then you'll support us? I didn't say that. The Dowager stood, moving to the window. I said I know the truth, but the truth doesn't matter to society. Perception matters. Reputation matters. And right now, your reputation is in tatters. So what do? You do nothing. You stay here. You avoid public appearances until the scandal dies down. She turned to face them. And you pray that Lady Venetia doesn't make good on her threat to ruin you completely. What threat? She's planning to publish the story. An anonymous letter to the society papers. Every sordid detail, real and imagined. Your father's disgrace. Your employment as a companion. Your alleged seduction of a grieving duke. The Dowager's expression was grim. By tomorrow evening, your name will be on every tongue in London. Marin felt the blood drain from her face. But we can deny it. You can do nothing. Denial only fans the flames. The Dowager's voice hardened. This is what I tried to protect you both from. This is why I pushed for Venetia. Not because I wanted her as a granddaughter, but because she was safe, predictable, Scandal-proof. I won't give Maren up, Caius said. Then you'll watch her be destroyed. The Dowager moved toward the door. I've done what I can. The rest is up to you. She left, and the study felt suddenly cavernous, filled with the weight of everything they couldn't control. Caius. Maren's voice shook. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should... Don't. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. Don't you dare sacrifice yourself to protect me from consequences I chose. But your reputation is worthless if I lose you to preserve it. His eyes burned into hers. We'll fight this. Together. Whatever it takes. But even as he spoke, Maren felt the foundations crumbling beneath her feet. The anonymous letter appeared 2 days later. Maren read it in the morning paper, her tea growing cold in her hands, the words blurring through gathering tears. It was worse than she'd imagined. Every detail of her father's disgrace, embellished with invented cruelties. Every position she'd held, twisted to suggest manipulation and scheming. Her mother portrayed as a grasping social climber, her brother as a wastrel and gambler. And Maren herself. The article painted her as a calculating seductress who had deliberately targeted a grieving duke, exploiting his vulnerability to secure herself a title. By noon, invitations were being withdrawn. Friends suddenly remembered prior engagements. The modiste who had been crafting Maren's wardrobe sent a note explaining that she could no longer fulfill the commission. By evening, even the servants whispered when she passed. Delphine tried to comfort her. Caius raged against the injustice, threatening to personally destroy Lady Venetia and everyone who had enabled her. But nothing could undo what had been done. Maren sat alone in the library, the same room where she and Caius had first spoken honestly, and felt the dream collapsing around her. She couldn't do this, couldn't watch Caius's reputation crumble, couldn't let Delphine suffer by association, couldn't drag the Dowager through scandal after scandal while society circled like sharks scenting blood. This had to end. She found writing paper in the desk drawer and composed 2 letters. The first to Delphine, thanking her for her friendship and asking her not to follow. The second to Caius. That one took 6 attempts. What did you say to the man you loved when you were leaving to save him from yourself? Your Grace, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Oh, please don't try to find me. I know you'll see this as surrender. You'll be angry. You'll want to fight. But some battles cannot be won, only survived, and I refuse to be the weapon that destroys you. You gave me something I never expected to have again. Hope. For 1 week, I believed that maybe fairy tales could come true, that maybe someone would choose me despite everything. You did choose me. That gift will last longer than any scandal. Be happy, Caius. Find someone who can stand beside you without bringing storms in her wake. Find someone worthy of everything you are. I love you. That's why I'm leaving. Yours, in gratitude and grief, Maren. She sealed the letter and left it on her pillow, next to the green leather poetry book she couldn't bring herself to take. The back entrance was unguarded at midnight. Maren slipped through with 1 small bag containing her original clothes and the few coins she'd managed to save. Everything else, the beautiful dresses, the borrowed jewels, the life she'd briefly inhabited, she left behind. The night was cold, the streets were empty, and with every step away from Windmere House, Maren felt pieces of herself shattering like glass. Home was a rented room above a butcher's shop, cramped and cold, and smelling of old meat. Her mother was asleep when she arrived, but Callum was awake, gambling debts and desperation etched into his face. Maren? He stared at her like she was a ghost. What are you? I thought you were... It's over. She dropped her bag on the narrow bed. All of it. Over. But the Duke will be better off without me. She said it firmly, decisively, as if believing it would make it true. But that night, alone in the darkness while her mother coughed and her brother paced, and the city sounds filtered through thin walls, Maren pressed her face into a threadbare pillow and wept. For 1 week, she'd tasted what life could be. Now she had to learn how to survive without it. 4 days passed like years. Maren threw herself into domestic tasks, scrubbing floors and mending clothes, and helping her mother with the small jobs she took in to make ends meet. She refused to speak of the Duke or the scandal or the dreams she'd abandoned. She refused to read the newspapers that might carry news of his name. She refused to feel anything at all. On the 5th day, Delphine appeared. She burst into the cramped room without warning, wild-haired and wild-eyed, out her fine dress completely inappropriate for this neighborhood. "You absolute fool," she declared. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Maren stared at her. "How did you find me?" Caius turned London upside down. He's been searching for 4 days. He hasn't slept. He's barely eaten. He threatened to challenge Lady Venetia's brother to a duel, which grandmother had to talk him out of. And he told the entire House of Lords that anyone who spoke your name with disrespect would answer to him personally. He shouldn't have done any of that. No, he should be here himself, but I convinced him to let me come first. Delphine grabbed her hands. "Maren, you have to come back." "I can't. The scandal is being managed." Delphine's eyes blazed. "Grandmother is handling it. She's called in favors from people who owed debts to her husband, to her father, to ancestors she's never even met. By next week, the narrative will have shifted entirely." "Shifted how?" Lady Venetia overplayed her hand. The letter was too vicious, too specific. People are starting to question whether it was written by a concerned citizen or a jealous rival. Delphine smiled grimly. "Grandmother may be a dragon, but she's our dragon, and she's decided to fight." Something flickered in Maren's chest. "Why?" "She never wanted me there. She wanted Caius protected. Turns out protecting him means protecting you." Delphine squeezed her hands. "She found something, Maren, about your father, about what really happened the night he was accused." The world tilted. "What do you mean?" "Lord Ashworth's gambling debts were about to be exposed, but he owed your father thousands of pounds, money he couldn't repay without his wife discovering his losses. So he manufactured the cheating scandal to discredit your father and avoid payment. I knew he was innocent. I always knew. Now everyone will know. Grandmother has evidence, letters, witnesses. She's prepared to destroy Lord Ashworth completely if he doesn't recant publicly." Tears streamed down Maren's face. "But why? Why would she do this for me?" "Because Caius loves you." Delphine's voice softened. "And because she finally realized that fighting for your family doesn't mean choosing the safe path. It means choosing the right one." The door opened behind them. Maren's mother appeared, thin and worn, but with eyes that still sparkled with sharp intelligence. "You should go," she said quietly. "I'm back to your Duke." "Mother, I've watched you these past days, seen you moving through this house like a ghost." Her mother crossed to her, cupping her face in work-roughened hands. "Your father didn't die so you could spend your life being safe. He died because society crushed him for a crime he didn't commit. Don't let them crush you too. What if I fail? What if I ruin everything?" "Then you fail having tried," her mother smiled. "That's more than most people can say." Maren looked at Delphine, at her mother, at the cramped, cold room that had been her world for 5 years. Then she looked at the door. Is Caius?" "Waiting in the carriage," Delphine grinned. "He wanted to storm up here himself, but I convinced him that might frighten your mother. He's been sitting there for 20 minutes, probably wearing a hole in the seat cushions." Maren laughed, the sound strange and unfamiliar after days of silence. "Tell him." She paused. "Tell him I'm coming." Caius was out of the carriage before she reached the street. He looked terrible. dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his cravat tied so poorly it would have made his valet weep. But his eyes, those familiar gray depths that had seen her from the very beginning, blazed with something fierce and desperate. Maren. Her name was a prayer, a plea. She ran to him. He caught her, crushing her against his chest, his face buried in her hair. She felt him shaking, felt the dampness against her temple that might have been tears. "Don't ever," he said hoarsely, "ever do that again. I thought I was protecting you." "I don't want to be protected. Well, I want to be with you." He pulled back, cupping her face, drinking in the sight of her like a man dying of thirst. "Do you understand? I would rather face every scandal in England than spend one more day without you. Your grandmother is on our side now." His laugh was slightly wild. Apparently, all it took was watching me completely fall apart to convince her that this is real. "Delphine said she found evidence about my father." "She did. Lord Ashworth is going to publicly acknowledge that the accusation was false. Your father's name will be cleared." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "You'll be able to hold your head high in any room in London." Maren's knees nearly buckled. After 5 years of shame, after 5 years of closed doors and cutting whispers, after 5 years of carrying the weight of a lie, I don't know what to say. "Say you'll come back. Say you'll give us another chance." His voice cracked. "Say you love me. I need to hear it. I need to know I didn't imagine everything. I love you." The words came easily now. "I've loved you since you handed me your mother's poetry book and told me to remember that courage means choosing to be brave anyway." He kissed her then, desperate and demanding, right there in the middle of a shabby street, while neighbors peered from windows and Delphine pretended to examine something fascinating on the carriage wheel. When they finally parted, Maren was crying again, but these tears tasted different. "Come home," Caius whispered. "Please." Yes. The carriage ride back to Windermere House felt like returning from exile. Delphine chattered happily about plans and parties, and the spectacular downfall of Lady Venetia, who had apparently been quietly sent to the country to recover from nervous exhaustion after the dowager's evidence came to light. But Maren barely heard her. She was too busy holding Caius's hand, feeling his fingers laced through hers, believing for the first time that this might actually work. The dowager was waiting in the entrance hall when they arrived. She looked smaller somehow, older. The fierce dragon Maren had faced seemed diminished, though her eyes were still sharp. "Miss Holloway." "Your Grace." They stood facing each other, two women who had started as adversaries and become something more complicated. "I owe you an apology," the dowager said stiffly. "I was cruel. I prioritized propriety over people. I nearly destroyed the one thing that has made my grandson happy since his father died. You were protecting him. I was being a coward." The admission clearly cost her. "My son loved his wife beyond reason, and losing her broke him. I didn't want Caius to experience that same pain, so I tried to prevent him from loving anyone at all." She paused. "I was wrong. You found the evidence about my father. I did what I should have done 5 years ago when I watched an innocent man be destroyed and said nothing." The dowager's voice hardened. "That was my true cowardice. Not protecting Caius from love, but failing to speak when speaking could have saved lives." Maren stepped forward and did something that shocked everyone in the hall, including herself. She embraced the dowager. The old woman stiffened. Then slowly, tentatively, returned the embrace. "Thank you," Maren whispered, "for giving me back my father's honor. Thank you for giving me back my grandson." They parted, both slightly embarrassed by the display. Caius watched with something like wonder on his face. "Well," Delphine said brightly, breaking the tension, "I think this calls for celebration and planning. We have a ball to attend next week, and we need to make absolutely certain that everyone sees exactly how united this family stands." "A ball?" Marin asked warily. "The Montague Ball, the final event of the season." Delphine grinned. The perfect place for a certain duke to make a very public declaration. Marin's eyes flew to Caius, who was suddenly very interested in examining the ceiling. "What kind of declaration?" "You'll see." His smile was mysterious. "Well, all you need to do is show up." The Montague Ball was the event of the season, and everyone knew something extraordinary was about to happen. Whispers had been building for a week. The Duke of Windermere had been seen visiting jewelers. The Dowager had been making unprecedented social calls to influential hostesses. Lady Venetia had not been seen in public since her nervous exhaustion began. And Miss Marin Holloway, the card cheat's daughter, who had somehow become the most talked-about woman in London, had been spotted at Madame Fournier's being fitted for a gown of deep sapphire silk that reportedly cost more than most families earned in a year. Marin stood at the top of the Montague staircase, her pulse pounding so loudly she was certain the orchestra could hear it over the music. "Ready?" Delphine whispered beside her. "No." "Perfect. Neither was I when I made my debut, and I only tripped twice." "That's not reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be. Now go. Your duke is waiting." Marin descended the stairs alone, each step feeling like a mile. The crowd parted before her, a sea of silk and speculation, every eye tracking her progress across the ballroom floor. Caius waited at the center of the room, impeccable in evening black, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, those familiar depths that had seen her broken and hopeless and afraid, blazed with barely contained emotion. She reached him. The orchestra fell silent, the whispers stilled. "Miss Holloway," he said, his voice carrying across the hushed ballroom. "You once told me that fairy tales don't happen to girls like you. I remember. You were wrong." He took her hand, his grip steady. "But I was wrong too. Agor, I thought I could protect myself from loss by never loving anything. I thought duty was enough. I thought safety was the same as happiness." He sank to one knee. The crowd gasped. Somewhere, a woman fainted. Marin heard none of it. "Marin Holloway, you stood alone at a ball where you'd just been humiliated, chin lifted, refusing to break, and something in me woke up. You challenged me. You fought for me. You ran away to protect me and broke my heart in the process." "Caius, I don't want safe," he continued. "I don't want appropriate. I don't want a life of duty without joy." He produced a small box, opening it to reveal a ring of sapphires and diamonds that caught the candlelight like captured stars. "I want you. I want arguments and laughter and terrifying vulnerability. Or I want to build something real with someone who sees me as more than a title." Tears streamed down Marin's face. "Everyone's watching." "Let them watch. Let them see what it looks like when a man chooses love over expectation." His voice cracked. "Marry me, Marin. Not because you need me, or I can save you, or any of the reasons society might invent. Marry me because I love you, and you love me, and that's enough. That's everything." The ballroom held its breath. Marin thought of her father, falsely accused and driven to death by society's cruelty. She thought of her mother, working her fingers raw to keep them fed. She thought of every door that had closed in her face, every whisper that had followed her, every moment she'd believed she was worth nothing. Then she looked at Caius, kneeling before her with his heart in his hands, and she thought of hope. "Yes," she said, 1,000 times, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, rose, and kissed her in front of every scandal-hungry gossip in London. The applause that erupted was neither polite nor restrained. It was thunderous. Delphine was crying. The Dowager was actually smiling. Even the most hardened society matrons were dabbing at their eyes with embroidered handkerchiefs. "That was rather dramatic," Marin murmured against his lips. "I learned from the best." 1 year later, the Duchess of Windermere stood in the library of her home, a letter in her hand and tears in her eyes. The letter was from Lord Ashworth's widow, written after her husband's death 2 months prior. It contained a full confession of everything: the manufactured scandal, the destroyed evidence, and the deliberate cruelty that had ended Edmund Holloway's life. It also contained an apology. Marin wasn't sure she could forgive, but she could release. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer of the desk that had once belonged to Caius's father. A reminder, a record, a relic of pain transformed into proof of survival. "You're crying." Caius appeared in the doorway, concern creasing his brow. "Happy tears," she said. "Mostly." He crossed to her, gathering her in his arms with the ease of long practice. She leaned into him, breathing in cedar and soap and the particular scent that meant home. "The Dowager wants to know if you'll join her for tea," he said. "She has opinions about the nursery wallpaper." Marin laughed. "She always has opinions. It's her finest quality." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Are you all right? Truly?" She considered the question. Her father's name had been cleared. Her mother lived in a cottage on the estate, comfortable and cared for. Callum had found honest work managing one of the smaller properties, his gambling days behind him. And she herself, she was a duchess, a wife, soon to be a mother, though only Caius and the Dowager knew that yet. She was happy. "I'm perfect," she said. "Unexpectedly, impossibly, ridiculously perfect." "Good." He smiled, the full, genuine smile she'd learned to treasure. "Because I have something for you." He produced a small wrapped package. Inside was a book, leather-bound, the pages filled with familiar handwriting. "Is this your father's journal? The Dowager found it among Lord Ashworth's effects." His voice was gentle. "Oh, she thought you should have it." Marin opened the book with trembling hands. Her father's words looked up at her, thoughts and observations, and small sketches from a life cut short too soon. And there, on the final page, a letter addressed to her. "My dearest Marin, if you're reading this, I've made choices that cannot be unmade. I'm sorry for the pain they will cause. I'm sorry for the burden I've left you to carry. But I want you to know something. Something I hope you'll remember when the world is cruel and the path seems impossible. You are worth more than their whispers. You are stronger than their judgment. And someday, someone will see that. Someone will choose you, not despite your circumstances, but because of who you are. When that happens, don't run. Don't hide. Don't let fear steal your chance at happiness. Be brave, so my darling girl. Be brave enough to let yourself be loved." Your father Marin closed the journal, pressing it to her chest. "He knew," she whispered. "Somehow, he knew." Caius held her while she cried, patient and steady, the way he'd held her through every storm of the past year. And later, when the tears were spent and the sun was setting through the library windows, they walked out to the garden together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Because that's what love was in the end, not the absence of storms, just someone to weather them with.